Hello world, my name is DJ Slope, a video gaming YouTube creator from merry old England. Journey with me as we go back in time to look into the history of forgotten mascots, video game franchises, genres, the people that made them, and most importantly, how I discovered them. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. The year is 1983 and DJ Slope from Slope's Game Room is born. And that was the single most important thing that happened that year. Okay. Second to that monumental occasion, Yu Suzuki started work on a game called Champion Boxing and published by a little known company called Sega. This was the first game that creator Yu Suzuki worked on at the company in his first year at Sega. But it wasn't until his second game that Sega would really start to take the developer seriously. Hang on. Without a doubt the first big step for Suzuki, released in 1985 to high praise and then ported onto several other Sega systems of the time. It was the game's incredible popularity that boosted Sega's interest in their new developer, and it was from this moment on that he released some of Sega's earliest successes. Any of these games ring a bell? You got Outrun, Afterburner, Power Drift, Virtual Racing. I think we can see a bit of a theme here. Can anyone guess it? Okay, missing that first game out, it's very unlikely you don't know what these absolutely legendary games are. All of which are not only incredibly popular, but also helps define the gaming world as we know it today. And probably most important for me, helped create the Sega we once knew. Oh my god, Sega for... Game over, yeah! Anyway, as time went on, Yu Suzuki continued to make great games for Sega, one of which was the massively popular Virtual Fighter. Need I say any more about this franchise? Okay, here's an interesting fact for you. You may not know this, but the fantastic side-scrolling beat-em-up game Final Fight was actually originally intended to be a Street Fighter spin-off. Well, just like Capcom with Street Fighter, Sega was also planning on a spin-off of their most beloved one-on-one fighting game, by creating Virtual Fighter RPG, and they put Yu Suzuki on the case. And this is it. Virtual Fighter RPG is the beginning of what we are all here to see. Shenmue. Now personally, I'm not the biggest fan of adventure RPG style games, and I've never completed some of the greatest, most popular ones out there. I don't know why, I just always seem to get bored and end up wanting to do something a little bit more exciting. However, thankfully for this video, Yu Suzuki was very different. He spent a lot of his time playing RPG and adventure games on his Macintosh, and he stated that this was the path that he wanted to take for Virtual Fighter RPG. But instead, he wanted to create, and I quote, my RPG. But I might as well not call it an RPG. What is he talking about? Well, put it this way. After playing the Shenmue games, which we'll get to in a bit, it actually all made sense. He didn't want to make a traditional role-playing game, aka an RPG, so instead he came up with the term Fully Realistic Eyes Entertainment, also known as free. Confused? I don't blame you. Yu Suzuki explains that this was a fully reactive game with very sensitive eyes. But let's just get the creative marketing cryptic jargon out of the way. What he's trying to say is that most RPGs at the time felt very restricted. What he planned on doing was created a sort of RPG/adventure type game where you can interact and do almost what you want. And you know what? This is exactly what he did. The game started life sometime in 1994 when Suzuki went to China to get research for Virtual Fighter. And whilst he was there, he decided he wanted to create a game with the story set in China. Now, I already stated that the game originally intended to be Virtual Fighter RPG, and if that ended up being the case, the story would feature one of the main guys from the series, Akira. Obviously, this eventually ended up changing to Rio, but one interesting point here is that if this did indeed become Virtua Fighter RPG or Akira's Quest, then it would have been a prequel to the Virtua Fighter series. In the storyline department, I mean. You see, the year that Virtua Fighter 1 takes place is 1993, and Akira is 25 in that game. And with Shenmue being set in 1986, Akira would have been 18, just like Ryo. You see, it all fits. This is until you add Virtua Fighter Kids into the mix, but let's ignore that. Now, it's obvious to see why Sega decided to turn Virtua Fighter into an RPG. Sonic, the company's most beloved mascot, was long gone. Okay, well, he might as well have been, and with Virtua Fighter being one of the Saturn's biggest, if not the biggest franchise on the system, it all made sense. But even with Virtua Fighter's popularity, it's unfortunate to say that the Sega Saturn died a quick and painful death, mainly due to the competition. And even though Virtua Fighter RPG was in development for 2 whole years, it's obvious to see why Sega eventually moved the game over to the Dreamcast. You see, Sega had given themselves a bad rep since the heydays of the Mega Drive, with console releases such as the Mega CD, the 32X, and now this, the Saturn. And they thought that games like Virtua Fighter RPG on the company's next system could bring Sega back into the spotlight. Yeah. Now, if you think the Sega Saturns had it rough with competition against things like the Sony PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, then you've got no idea. This bad boy was up against such greats as Nintendo's GameCube, Sony's PlayStation 2, and the new kid on the block, Microsoft's Xbox. Even with Sega's decent launch on $99.99, its brilliantly free game, easy online capability, DLC, and its amazing fishing simulators, it unfortunately didn't really stand a chance when looking at the competition. But as you may know, this wasn't Sega's biggest enemy. No, it wasn't even a certain Italian plumber or a Spartan, but instead a spinning reindeer. You know what I'm talking about, you naughty pirate kids. Anyway, it's somewhere about this time where the game changed its name from Virtua Fighter RPG and became its own IP entirely, Shenmue. And if you had a Dreamcast back in the day and lived in Japan when you bought Virtua Fighter 3 text back, Virtua Fighter 3 TB, then you got an extra disc with a video on it called Project Berkeley. This was Shenmue, or at least the code name for Shenmue, and was most people's first look at this brand new IP. Well, a month later, the game finally came out on December 29th, 1999. Now, even though the game sold fairly well and was on a system that was quickly dying, Yu Suzuki's vision for the first chapter of his 16-chapter long Shenmue series came out exactly how it was intended. His free game engine was in full effect, and it really did feel like a world where you could do almost anything. You see, almost everything in the game can be played with, interacted with, you can speak to pretty much everyone, all of which have real voice actors. I'm looking at you, Zelda. This was like nothing we'd ever seen before. Some of my favourite pastimes involved going to the arcades and playing on retro arcade Sega games, collecting those little Sega toys from the vending machine, but these are all just pastimes. Nothing here, apart from the bits that affect the main story, are mandatory, and everything you hear me yabber on about here are both incredibly genius, like waiting for a bus or getting a job riding a forklift, and at the same time completely mundane and boring, like waiting for a bus or getting a job riding a forklift. The game is really giving you what you want from it, and it's these meaningless tasks that make the story so much more believable and real compared to the Tony and Guy haircut RPGs you're normally used to. But this just feels different. It's real, it's believable, it's free. When you play the game, the day becomes night, shop open and close, everyone in the game is doing something. I mean, what's this guy doing here? What about this guy? Where's he going? And I'm sure it's no surprise as to why people become a little bit obsessive with this series. But however, this did come at a very high cost of $70 million, making it the most expensive game ever created at the time. Well, actually, that's what Sega told us. Let's look at the facts. Let's say this pile of money here is $70 million. It's pretty impressive for one game, right? Well, a few years back, Yu Suzuki actually let out of the bag that the game cost a decent amount less than this and actually cost $47 million. Okay, that's still a pretty decent amount of money for sure. Well, actually 47 million is what Sega spent on Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2. Okay, we've cut that in half, still decent, but it also spent that money on the unreleased Shenmue for the Saturn. And it doesn't stop there. The released pictures and clips we see from Shenmue on the Saturn actually have screenshots showing parts of the story from Shenmue 2. So let's look at it like this. That 47 million is actually going to get cut down to 3 or possibly 4 games. Not only is that significantly different from the figure that Sega once gave us, but makes Shenmue 3, the Kickstarter, seem not too underwhelming. But we'll get to that Kickstarter a little bit later on. Either way, I just wanted to set the record straight. Sega did not pay quite as much as you may have realised, but considering the time and with this being a brand new IP for the company, Shenmue still cost a decent amount of money, and more importantly, it didn't make it back. And I seriously hate saying this, but you can see why Sega was a bit hesitant on not making a Shenmue 3. Heck, do the gamers out there actually need or want a third game in the series?
I'm a professional.
This is Castlevania.
Oh yeah, sick.
What's
Bloodstain. Dude, this is a crazy conference.
Okay, yes, for some hardcore fans, we definitely do. But let's be honest, these guys are not the masses, and even though there are some insane fans out there, I think it's this reason alone that we never got to progress the story any further than Shenmue 2, and the 5 chapters out of the 16 that the story had offered us already. I hope this video encouraged you to not only play the greatest RPG/adventure game of all time, but to also back the project in any way you can. As for the main story of Shenmue, that's all we really have to go on so far. One day, however, when the time's right, I'll break that Slopes Game Room rule set and make a part 2 to this video, as I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about in the near future. However, even though Shenmue 1 and 2 and the upcoming Shenmue 3 are all we have to go on in the main series, it isn't the last we ever heard of Ryo. So first off, let's look at Shenmue Online. So what is Shenmue Online? It's basically an unreleased, massively multiplayer online role-playing game based in the world of Shenmue. Sounds a bit strange, right? Well, obviously not as strange as the still not officially cancelled Michael Jackson MMORPG, but still it's up there. The game was a joint venture between both Sega Japan and JC Entertainment. What we know is that the game started development in 2004 at the latest, and when the game was finally presented to the fans of the genre, they were disappointed. The thing is, the original Shenmue game looked amazing for the time, and to be fair, they held up pretty damn well, even to this day. Like I said, eventually the game was although not officially, cancelled, and the last we saw of the game is the footage you're seeing here, released in 2006. Maybe one day we will get to see more of what looks like an interesting concept. So how does a single player storyline game like Shenmue work in an MMORPG world? Yu Suzuki explains. You would join one of 3 clans and go through the story completing tasks for your leader. The clans would interact in both friendly and hostile ways, and Landy and Ryo will definitely make appearance during these situations. The collecting toys from the original games and arcade section was set to make a return too, along with more exclusive content not before seen. Oh yeah, and the QuickTime events were also supposed to come back. As expected, the game was planned to be massive compared to the original games, and would include over 1,200 buildings and locations for the players to explore, including in which would be your very own house. And as the Shenmue series was set in China and was well received in China, the game was only going to be released in China, or at least it was going to be the testing ground for the game. And that's it. Not much else is known about this game, and like I said, hopefully one day we will discover more. Next up for the series is Shenmue City, a smartphone game released on smartphones 10 years after the original in December 2010. This was in an attempt to revive the Shenmue series, and as you may have guessed, did not happen. This time you take control of Rio again, and it's basically a sort of retelling of the original game. But obviously it looks nothing like that. And this game was intended to be more of a clone of the popular Facebook social media type game, Mafia Wars. Yes, that's right, the big Shenmue revival was going to be an iOS and Android game. What a joke! Saying that, the game was released, and it even had plans on being sent to Western audiences under the name Shenmue Town. But alas, the game servers were shut down only a year later, and it never left Japan. You think those two games were weird? You ain't seen nothing yet.
Welcome to the Bristol Studios. I'm Chris Berman, and this is NFL Countdown.
After this, we actually got to see Rio as an unlockable character in what is possibly his weirdest cameo. ESPN NFL football on the original Xbox. Now unfortunately I cannot find a picture or any footage of this anywhere, but I don't feel too bad in not including it in this video. I hate sports games, and to unlock Rio you need to complete 100 career interceptions, whatever that means.
A big welcome from Carnival Island, where we're just about ready to start the race.
Moving on, we have Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, where Rio is back in his trusty motorbike and forklift truck. Sure, it's not another Shenmue game, but come on, you've got to admit, this is pretty cool. Plus the game is actually pretty damn good and well worth picking up. As is its sequel, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed. And what is really cool about this one is that Rio pilots the Outrun, Hang On, and Space Harrier sit-down arcade cabinets as his car, boat and plane. Hang on, what's this? Ooh, Sega, you big tease. And so far, that is it. Well, 4 years after that game, and 14 years after Shenmue 2, we finally have confirmation that Shenmue is coming back. I've backed the Kickstarter to get the game as a physical PC copy, and if you have any interest in this series, I highly suggest that you back this ambitious project too. Let's all work together to help complete the story that's been sitting in limbo for far too long. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed my video on Shenmue. I think we've got just about enough time to fit in one more Slopes Game Room episode, the story of Bobo. Have you watched my video based on Gremlin? And why not? In this video I talk about the legendary comic book artist Leo Baxendale and his work on such strips as Sweeney Toddler, The Bash Street Kids and Dennis the Menace. No, not this Dennis the Menace, the real one. Well, today on Slopes Game Room I want to talk about another comic book artist that you may not have heard of. But to do this, we need to leave merry old England and go past France. Don't worry, I'll cover asterisks in the Tintin comics, movies and games another time, as we make our way to Belgium. And it's here that I, DJ Slope, will introduce to you Paul Delige, and more importantly his comic book creation, Bobo. Bobo, this guy here, has been sentenced to 20 years in jail for stealing a push bike. Yeah, this might seem a bit of an excessive sentence, but the kicker is that the bike belongs to the judge who's giving out the sentence. He gets thrown in a jail called In the Pocket. Yes, that's its real name. And all the comics all revolve around Bobo trying to escape in various and comical ways. Looking at the covers, you get a really good feel of what the comics are going to be like. Now, unfortunately, that really is all we have to go on. Yeah, they look great and they're right up my street, definitely something that I would want to read, but they have not been translated to English. Such a shame. However, if this is something that looks like it'll float your boat like it does mine, and considering you're watching this, I can only assume you're into video games too, then you'll be happy to hear that he did get a video game. Stir Crazy featuring Bobo, or just Bobo as it was known in its country of origin. The game was released in 1988 for the Amstrad CPC 464, obviously the version I owned, the Atari ST, Commodore 64, PC, and the Thomson TO7. Now, like I said, I obviously had the Amstrad version as a kid, but today we're going to be looking at the Amiga version, as it is, in my opinion, the best version of the game. So what's it about? Essentially, it's just a selection of mini-games. Now, don't let this put you off. This one is really, really good, and most importantly, holds up well even by today's standards. So here are the minigames. Firstly, we have this one. Yeah, you've seen ones like this before, it's very similar to the classic Tapper game, but for this setting it works quite well. And in fact, I actually played this before I played the original Tapper. But anyway. In this one, you're tasked with cleaning dirty footprints. This one's actually quite a lot harder than it looks. Okay, this one's pretty clever. You need to bounce the inmates that are jumping from their cells, but not back into their cells, but instead out of the prison. Okay, so this one's dated quite a lot, there's no denying that. Maybe this is where Sonic Team got the inspiration for Sonic's obsession of grinding of late. Then again, maybe not. So here we have one of the more obscure ones. As a 7-year-old kid, I never really got this one. And not a lot has changed. Bobo has taken it upon himself to make sure everyone gets a good night's sleep by retucking them in, I suppose, all whilst avoiding what I can only imagine is a piss pot. Either way, this is essentially another Tapper type clone. Now you may have noticed by the numbers that I've actually missed one of the 6 minigames. Why? Because it's my favourite and I wanted to save it till last, alright? So this one's one of those obvious button mashing minigames. And out of the millions of the ones I've played in other party games and track and field clones, this one's got to be up there, one of my favourites. Potatoes go down the chute and you got to peel them. Do it as fast as you can, otherwise it gets too much for poor old Bobo. And you'll end up getting flooded by the bloody things. Like I said, this plays exactly like any other button mashing minigame that you're used to, but in this one, you're peeling potatoes. And you know what? That's bloody awesome. The game was created by Infogrames, and reviews for the game were above average. Gary Wilson of Amiga Computing enjoyed the character so much in his playthrough of the game that he predicted Bobo could potentially become one of the megastars of computer entertainment. Unfortunately though, for Gary and myself, this was the last time we ever got to see anything of the mischievous inmate. So there you have it. I'm not sure why this game has stuck in my mind for such a long time, especially considering I think my version of the game, a lot of the mini-games didn't load properly. But, looking back, it's one of the few games that looks as good as I remember it. Give it a shot if you've got a chance. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this video.
If you want to see the original video to this and many others, check out Slopes Game Room on YouTube. You can also find me on social media by searching Slopes Game Room on Facebook and Twitter. This is DJ Slopes signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.